Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're really going deep into the brain.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about this one because we're going to be talking about neuroscience
Yeah.
and how it applies to selling. So specifically, the book, The Neuroscience of Selling by John Asher.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is going to be really interesting because we talk a lot about the psychology of selling and persuasion and influence.
Yeah.
But going a layer deeper and looking at the actual structure of the brain.
The neuroscience.
Yeah, the neuroscience of it, I think, will be really fascinating for the audience.
I think so too. And I'm excited to sort of, extract the most powerful insights that you can glean from the book and help people sort of improve their sales game.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
We can use that knowledge in any area of life, really.
Right.
But
Especially sales.
especially sales, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we talk a lot about, different tactics and techniques and tips.
Yeah.
But have you ever wondered why some salespeople just seem to, click
Yeah.
with clients?
Yeah.
And others just, they never quite get there.
Yeah, they just can't seem to connect.
They just can't connect.
Yeah.
And so, maybe this is some of the answer as to why that is.
Yeah, I think so. And it turns out that a lot of it really has to do with just understanding how the brain works. And
Yeah.
there's this model called the Triune brain model that, it suggests that our brains are basically made up of three layers.
Okay.
And
Three layers.
yeah, so there's the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and the human brain.
Okay.
And the reptilian brain is also known as the old brain.
Okay.
And it's the most primal part of our brain.
Right.
It's responsible for our survival instincts
Right.
and basic decision making.
Yep.
And guess what? It's this old brain that actually holds the key to influencing buying decisions.
Okay, so we're going way back.
We're going way back
At the lizard
to
brain.
the lizard brain.
Okay. I like it.
Okay.
All right, so tell me more about this old brain. How does it work? How does it impact sales?
So you can almost imagine the old brain as this gatekeeper, right?
Okay. Sure.
It's constantly scanning for threats and rewards.
Okay.
And it's driven by 6 core activators.
Okay.
And if you can tap into these activators, as a salesperson, you can unlock the door to persuasion.
Ooh. Okay, 6 activators, 6 keys to the kingdom.
That's right.
I like it. All right, let's break them down one by one.
Okay.
So the first one I have here is the me focus.
The me focus.
Tell me about that.
So this is where a lot of sales pitches go wrong.
Okay.
Because the old brain is inherently selfish.
Okay.
It's primarily concerned with its own survival and its
right.
own well-being.
Sure.
So when you start a sales presentation talking all about your company and your achievements or your product features, you're essentially talking to a brick wall.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Right.
The old brain is like, what about me?
Yeah.
How does this benefit me?
What's in it for me?
Exactly. That's all it cares about.
Okay.
So you have to shift that focus from me to you,
Okay.
right? And Asher gives the example of this digital marketing CEO in Toronto
Yeah.
who landed this huge telecom client.
Right?
And she didn't start by boasting about her company's awards or anything like that.
No.
She started by deeply understanding the client's pain points
Right.
and demonstrating how her company could specifically address those needs.
So it's more about saying hey, here's how we can solve your problems
Exactly.
rather than here's what we do.
Exactly. Here's how we can make your life better.
Right.
Here's how we can save you money.
Right.
Here's how we can increase your revenue.
It's like speaking the old brain's language.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to speak directly to that
Yeah.
self-interest.
Okay. I like it. All right. So we got to shift the focus from me to you.
From me to you. That's number 1.
All right. What's number 2?
Number 2 is simplicity.
Okay.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
The old brain gets overwhelmed by complexity,
Yeah.
right? It craves clear, concise, easy to grasp ideas.
It can only handle so much.
That's right.
Yeah.
So think about, those trade show booths
Yes.
that Asher mentions where there's just
Too much going on.
way too much information
Yeah.
crammed into a tiny space.
Right?
That's a prime example of what not to do,
Yeah.
right? Because it's just like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah. I've been to those trade shows where it's just
It's overwhelming.
I'm overwhelmed. I just want to get out of here.
You just shut down.
Yeah. My brain just shuts down.
Yeah, and the old brain's like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah. Exactly right.
So the takeaway here is keep your messaging simple,
Yeah.
focused, and visually appealing.
Right.
You don't want to overwhelm your buyer
Okay.
with too many details.
So it's not about dumbing things down.
Right.
It's about making it easy
It's about distilling it
to understand.
to its essence.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I like it. All right. So me, Focus.
Simplicity. What about this idea of beginnings and endings?
Okay, so the old brain remembers things that stand out,
Okay,
right?
right.
And particularly the beginning and the end of an interaction.
So like a strong opening
Yes,
and a strong close.
that's right. It's like that classic storytelling principle,
Oh.
right? You need a strong opening hook
Right.
and a memorable closing scene.
Yeah, and Asher uses the example of George Lucas
Yes.
and how he started Star Wars
Yes.
with all the action
With the act.
and saved the credits for the end.
Exactly.
I know.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing.
He understood that
Yeah.
you capture people's attention
Right.
at the beginning and you leave them
And you end strong.
with a lasting impression at the end.
I like it. So how do we apply this to sales?
So it's more about framing the entire interaction as a compelling story,
Okay.
right? So think about how you can grab your buyer's attention from the moment you connect.
Whether it's an email, a phone call, or a face-to-face meeting.
Right.
And just as importantly, how can you end the conversation in a way that leaves them wanting more?
Right. So it's not just about like delivering information.
Right.
It's about creating an experience.
It's about telling a story
Yeah.
that resonates with the buyer.
Okay. All right. So we're telling stories.
We're telling stories.
We're starting strong. We're ending strong.
That's right.
All right. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So what's next?
So the next activator is all about differentiation.
Okay.
The old brain loves contrast.
Okay.
It needs to see how you stand out from the competition.
So this is where your unique selling proposition comes in.
Exactly. Your USP.
Your USP, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're just like everybody else, then
Why should they choose you?
why did they choose you? Right.
Right.
Okay. And Asher uses a good example of his own company.
He does. He
Yeah.
uses his own company as an example because their USP is that all their trainers
Yeah.
are former CEOs.
Right. So they have all this real world experience.
Right.
And they can actually empathize
Exactly.
with their clients.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. So what's another example of that?
Well, think about the example that he gives of the service provider
Yeah.
whose closing rates doubled after they incorporated video into their presentations.
Okay.
Now, it wasn't that the content itself changed drastically,
Right.
but the way it was presented
Okay.
made all the difference.
So it ties into the next one.
It does.
Vivid images.
Vivid images.
Right.
The old brain is visual.
Yeah.
It responds to images
Mhm.
and experiences that create a lasting impression.
So it's not just about what you say.
Right.
It's about how you show it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't have to be some elaborate video
Sure.
for every interaction you have.
Right.
But even just simple visuals,
Right.
like well-designed slides,
Yeah.
or even a handwritten note
Sure.
can make a big impact.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you're trying to create an experience
That engages that old brain.
on multiple levels.
On multiple levels.
Okay, this is good. I'm liking all this. All right, so we've got 4.
Okay.
What else we got?
All right. So number 5 is active engagement.
Okay.
So the old brain loves stories.
Yeah.
Especially stories that involve relatable characters, vivid imagery, and emotional depth.
Right.
Think about the stories that have resonated with you throughout your life.
Yeah.
They probably had all those elements.
Here.
And so by becoming a skilled storyteller, you can unlock that same power
Okay.
in your sales interactions.
So again, it's not about just like throwing facts and figures.
Right.
It's about connecting
Connected in an emotional
on an emotional level
and telling a story.
and drawing them into that narrative.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's all about stories.
It's all about stories.
All right. So we've got these 6 rather
Yeah.
old brain activators.
Mhm.
And I'm already starting to see how we can use these
Yeah.
to craft more compelling sales interactions.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, I'm curious how these activators tie into this concept
Okay.
of cognitive biases that you mentioned earlier.
Right. So cognitive biases,
Yeah.
they're like these mental shortcuts that our brains use
Right.
to simplify decision making.
Okay.
And in the context of sales,
Yeah.
understanding these biases can be incredibly powerful.
Okay. So is there a connection there between the old brain activators?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a connection there.
All right. Tell me more.
So cognitive biases, yeah, they're like these hidden forces, right, that shape how we see things.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they influence the decisions that we make.
Right.
A lot of times without us even realizing it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
And in sales, understanding these biases
Yeah.
can really give you a leg up.
Okay. Give me an example. Like, how could a cognitive bias come into play?
Sure. So let's take the availability bias, for example.
Yeah.
And this bias refers to our tendency to overestimate the likelihood of something happening. just based on how easily we can recall examples of it.
Okay, so like if I've recently had a string of successful deals
Right.
with tech startups,
Yeah,
I might mistakenly believe that all tech startups are easy to sell to.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it can be dangerous
Right.
because you might start chasing after these unqualified leads
Right.
or making assumptions about a buyer's needs
Right.
without doing your due diligence.
Yeah, you're just seeing patterns that aren't really there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's an example of how a bias could potentially hurt you
Right.
in a sales interaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now let's say we've done our prospecting and we're ready to start
Right.
building that rapport
Building rapport.
with a potential buyer.
Yes.
This is where I think it gets really interesting because,
It does.
building rapport is so important,
It's crucial.
but it can be really hard.
Yeah. It can feel elusive sometimes.
Yeah. So are there specific biases that we can leverage?
There are.
Okay.
Yeah. And, remember those old brain activators we talked about?
Yeah.
Those come into play here too.
Okay.
But now we're kind of adding another layer
Another layer.
by looking at these specific biases.
Okay.
Things like primacy and ultimate attribution and confirmation.
Oh, okay. Lots of big words.
All right.
Okay. Well, let's start with primacy.
Okay.
I've always heard, first impressions matter.
Right.
Is there science to back that up?
There is.
Okay.
The primacy bias tells us that the first information that we get about someone
Okay.
really influences
Right.
our overall impression of them.
So, like, if I show up late to a meeting,
Wow.
looking flustered and unprepared,
Yeah,
that's not a good first impression.
not a good start.
Yeah.
Remember, the old brain is visual,
Right.
and it's always scanning for threats.
Right.
So if you show up looking disorganized or like you don't respect their time,
Yeah.
you're gonna trigger those alarm bells.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so primacy bias. We got to make a good first impression.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
How about this ultimate attribution bias?
Okay, so the ultimate attribution bias
Yeah.
refers to our tendency to attribute someone's behavior
Okay.
to their character
Okay.
rather than to the situation that they're in.
So if a buyer seems hesitant
Right?
or skeptical,
Yeah.
I shouldn't just assume they're a difficult person.
Exactly.
Okay.
There might be other things going on
Right.
that you're not aware of.
That I'm not aware of. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we got to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly.
All right.
Consider the context.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. And confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
This is a good one.
Yeah, so this is our tendency to look for information
Okay.
that confirms our pre-existing beliefs.
So if I'm already going into the meeting
Right.
with a negative bias,
With a negative bias.
I'm going to be looking for all the reasons why this person is not a good fit.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's obviously not going to help me
Not going to help you.
close the deal.
Nope, Bob.
Okay, so these biases can really work against us
They can
if we're not careful.
if we're not aware of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about primacy, ultimate attribution, confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any others that we should be thinking about?
There are a few others. Similarity,
Okay.
warmth, and even physical touch, believe it or not,
Okay.
all play a role
Interesting.
in how we connect with other people.
Okay, well, let's break those down.
Okay.
So similarity.
So similarity bias tells us that we tend to like and trust people who are similar to us,
Makes sense.
right? So if you
Right.
can find common ground with your buyer,
Right.
whether it's a shared hobby,
Yeah.
a similar background,
Yeah.
or even just a shared sense of humor,
Right.
you can create that instant bond.
So I'm not trying to be fake,
Right.
but I'm just trying to find some genuine connection.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. How about warmth?
So the warmth bias suggests that we tend to perceive people who are kind, helpful, and compassionate
Yeah.
as more trustworthy and likable.
So it's not just about being
Right.
competent
It's not just about being smart.
and smart.
Yeah.
It's about being a good person.
It's about showing that you care.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then physical touch?
Physical touch.
Now, I'm not talking about
Right.
inappropriate touching,
Not inappropriate.
obviously, but a well-timed handshake,
handshake, yeah.
a light touch on the arm,
Okay.
maybe to emphasize a point,
Right.
even just good eye contact can all contribute to that positive.
So just kind of like those subtle cues.
Subtle cues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So this is fascinating.
It is.
I feel like I have so many more tools now
You do.
to build rapport
Yeah.
than I did before.
And the best part is
Yep.
these tools are rooted in science.
Right.
It's not just anecdotal evidence.
This is how the brain works.
Yeah. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground here
We have.
with these biases.
Mm-hmm.
But before we move on, I want to talk about listening,
Okay.
because I think we all know that listening is important in sales,
Right.
but I feel like there's more to it
There is.
than just hearing words.
Yes.
So what does neuroscience tell us about the art of perfect listening?
Yeah, you're right. It is more than just, hearing the words.
Right.
You have to really engage with the information,
Right.
process it, and then respond in a way
Yeah.
that shows that you truly get it.
Right.
You know what the other person is saying.
Yeah, and I know I'm guilty of this sometimes. Like when someone's talking to me, I'm already like
Thinking about your response.
thinking about my response or thinking about,
Right.
what I'm going to say next.
Yeah.
And then I miss stuff.
You miss this crucial detail.
I miss the details. Yeah. So how do we become better listeners?
So one technique that Asher talks about is note-taking.
Okay.
And you might be thinking, well, I have a good memory. I
Yeah.
don't need to write things down.
Right.
But here's the thing. Our brains are wired to forget.
Really?
Studies show that without taking notes, we only retain about 3 key points.
Wow.
From a conversation just 20 minutes later.
That's crazy.
I know.
Okay.
So by taking notes, we're essentially forcing our brain to pay attention to encode that information more deeply.
So we're actively engaging with it?
You're actively engaging.
Okay.
And there's another subtle benefit to note-taking.
Okay.
Asher recommends actually asking the buyer's permission before you start taking notes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Why is that?
So it's a subtle way to shift the power dynamic.
Okay.
Right? By asking permission, you're acknowledging their control
Okay.
over the conversation.
Right.
And it makes them feel more respected
Okay.
and valued.
So it's not just about like remembering the information.
Right.
It's also about like the psychology of it.
It's about the psychology and making them feel good.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've listened, we've taken notes. What's next?
Then you want to summarize and repeat back what you've heard,
Okay.
right? So that you're making sure that you understood everything correctly.
Yeah.
And it shows them that you've been listening.
Right.
And that you care.
It shows that you're paying attention.
You're paying attention.
Okay.
Yeah.
So focus, take notes, summarize.
That's it.
It's so simple.
It's simple, but it's powerful.
But powerful.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're ready to close the deal.
Close the deal.
This is the grand finale.
This is it.
All right, so what are these closing principles?
So Asher outlines 6 principles that kind of challenge traditional assumptions about closing.
Good.
And they align with everything that we've been talking about.
Okay.
So principle number 1 is that you can't close until the buyer is ready.
Right. You can't force it.
You can't force it. You have to wait for the buyer to shift.
Oh. So how do we know when they've shifted?
So it's a combination of verbal and nonverbal cues.
Okay.
So verbally, they might start making attachment statements.
Okay.
Like, this is a good location for the item.
Okay.
Or they might repeat a question you asked,
All right.
indicating that they're really considering the details.
Okay.
And then nonverbally, you're looking for a relaxed posture.
Yeah.
Genuine smiles, consistent eye contact.
Right.
Maybe they're mirroring your body language. All those things suggest
Engagement.
engagement. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if their arms are crossed, they're fidgeting,
Right.
avoiding eye contact.
It's not a good sign.
That's not a good sign.
Okay, so we're looking for those cues.
Look for the cues.
All right, and then once we've sensed that shift.
Right. So principle number 2 is most buyers will almost never close themselves,
Really?
even when they're ready.
So we have to guide them.
You have to guide them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so how do we do that without being pushy?
So this is where those closing techniques come in,
Okay.
right?
Give me some examples.
So you've got the direct close,
Okay.
which is very straightforward.
Right.
You've got the alternative close,
Okay.
where you give them 2 options.
Right.
You've got the I recommend close,
Yeah.
which works well for existing clients.
Yep.
Then you've got the when or if close,
Yeah.
the test it out first,
Yeah.
close the window of opportunity close.
Okay, so all these different ways
Different ways to frame it.
to frame the decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, it's about choosing the right technique for the situation.
For the buyer.
For the buyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then principle number 5. This is a good one.
Okay.
After you ask for the business,
Yes.
you should say nothing
Nothing.
until the buyer responds.
That's right.
Ooh, that's hard.
The silence.
And the silence is powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then principle number 6.
Okay.
Once the deal is done,
Yeah.
stop talking.
Yeah. Stop talking. Celebrate the win, but don't oversell it.
Right, because then you might
You might introduce doubt.
introduce doubt
Yeah.
or buyer's remorse.
Exactly.
Okay.
So just be quiet.
Be quiet. Let them enjoy it.
Let them enjoy it.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Really fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating.
This whole world of neuroscience
Yeah.
applied to selling.
Yeah.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that selling isn't about manipulation.
It's not.
It's about connecting.
It's about building
It's
relationships.
understanding people
Yes.
and really creating those win-win situations.
Absolutely.
So thank you to our listener
Yes.
who recommended this book to us,
Yes, thank you.
The Neuroscience of Selling by John Asher.
Great book.
And to our listeners out there,
Yeah.
remember these principles.
Yes.
You can use them
Absolutely.
in any area of your life,
Not just sales.
not just sales,
Yeah.
to be more persuasive,
Be more influential?
to connect with people on a deeper level.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.